Well, the House of Representatives is giving President Obama 2 weeks to explain exactly why the U.S. military should stay involved with the conflict in Libya. It passed a non-binding resolution Friday that rebukes the president for sending military resources to Libya without seeking approval from Congress first. The House rejected a stronger measure put forth by Congressman Dennis Kucinich that called for total U.S. withdrawal from the Libyan mission within 15 days. And I'm joined now by that Democratic Congressman Dennis Kucinich of Ohio. Good morning to you, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you.
What impact do you expect this non-binding resolution to have?
Plenty of impact. It says that Congress is now finally engaged on the issue of Libya. It starts with a constitutional imperative, but now Congress is demanding the administration produce justification for its policies. That's a very positive development.
Okay, 14 days. What do you want or expect to hear from the president?
Well, I think the information gathering is important, but in that 14-day period, this is a perfect opportunity for the United States to play a role in bringing the parties together and achieve a peace agreement. I mean, we should be leading the way for a ceasefire, a dialogue between the parties, a blueprint for democracy in Libya, but we're not going to get it encouraging a stalemate, which actually is what's happening with the U.S. and NATO right now in the continued attacks.
But Gaddafi doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Do you think it's possible to achieve democracy while he stays?
Actually, before this latest round of violence, the Gaddafi regime was moving towards the construction of an e-democracy at a local level. You know, a lot of this was swept aside once the violence began. But we need to bring the parties together, find a way to achieve peace and stop the escalation of violence, which NATO, frankly, is encouraging with the bombing attacks and now the helicopter raids. It's a stalemate. You break the stalemate with a peace plan.
But if Gaddafi were just to step aside, wouldn't that be a solution right there?
Well, listen, I think that the conditions are ripe for his transition out of any control of the government. I think that's absolutely right. But we cannot, and I don't think we'll be able to, just force him out with bombs. A ground troop attack is out of the question. But we need to start to look at whether or not the preconditions for a peace plan are there. I believe they are. Tomorrow I'll be releasing a full plan that I model after the African Union plan that was unfortunately rejected initially. And let's face it, with the rebels believing that they have an Air Force and a Navy at their disposal through the United States and NATO, they don't have any incentive to get to a peace agreement. However, they're running out of money. They're disorganized, and I think we're at the point where let's move towards a peace agreement instead of escalating a war that is grinding towards a stalemate.
A peace agreement that you suggest would allow democracy to play out. How? Show me the steps, how that would play out.
Well, you first keep in mind, Libya was working on an e-democracy before this violence erupted at a local level. I mean, actually electronically, where people would be able to elect people at a local council level. Now, the country has to grow into a democracy because it hasn't had anything like it. But you can't impose a democracy through bombing. That's an idea that is so archaic and should be rejected and should have been rejected in Iraq, Afghanistan, and now in Libya. We have to bring the parties together, help them fashion their own destiny, and quit believing that we're going to bomb one side into acquiesce, and the other side, who we really don't fully understand who they are, will take control.
Sure, but isn't there a certain almost naivete to think that this democratic process, this e-process, were it even to have played out with Colonel Gaddafi still staying at the helm of things, would things really change?
Actually, a deeper inspection of the events in Libya would reveal that Colonel Gaddafi was ready to step down and move towards a kind of a senior position, actually go back to his home and let a transition begin at a national level in Libya. This attack that NATO launched actually ended up, I think, retarding any efforts in Libya towards the kind of reforms that we say we want.
Are you suggesting that this prospect of Gaddafi stepping down and going a bit aside to a sort of governing senior position there, that was not taken into account before this attack was launched?
Absolutely not. It wasn't even discussed. I mean, there are so many things that happened in Libya in the last few years that have just been ignored by the media, frankly, because the Obama administration made a decision to just go in and join a NATO attack without any full examination of what was happening in Libya before. Remember, George Bush effected a rapprochement with Libya once Libya agreed to get rid of its weapons of mass destruction capability. And then you had the IMF and the World Bank getting in there, and there was enormous investments in Libya. So while this was going on, Gaddafi was trying to move towards the West, and internally Gaddafi, with members of his family, were trying to figure out a way to transition towards a democracy, beginning at a local level, with Colonel Gaddafi accepting an emeritus, if you could call it that, status. So this, you know, I reject any cartoon version of events in Libya, which frankly some elements in the administration are promoting.
Fact is that there's nothing cartoonish in the least about members of the citizens in Libya, Benghazi and otherwise, being told by their leader that they're going to be rooted out and he's going to come into their closets and take them out and massacre them if they even voice any sense of opposition to the government. I mean, how much time did the Obama administration have to act to try to prevent a human slaughter like that?
Well, we have to separate the rhetoric of someone who's dealing with an insurrection from what was actually happening. There was no massacre, and the rhetoric, which was unfortunate, did not require a full attack by NATO. We do not have clear objectives there. We need to work towards a peace plan, and that's where we're at right now. But I'm saying, yes, that the war against Libya was not necessary. That's exactly what I'm saying. How
do you know what rhetoric to believe and what rhetoric not to believe? How can you believe that Colonel Gaddafi is considering this, as we're going to call it here for the purpose of discussion, the senior emeritus position, and yet also not believe that he's going to go out and slaughter people, as he says, by rooting them out of their closets?
You have to first start with the fact that are there legitimate aspirations for a democratic transition in Libya? Yes, of course. That's number one. Number two, the event that you speak of was a rhetorical response to what was a nonviolent protest that turned violent, that was seized on by people who had a totally different agenda than the nonviolent aspirations of the people of Libya. So then that requires a certain amount of judgment to say, do you intervene violently? Let's face it, all over the region there's been violence. But if you use that as a reason for the United States to get involved, we're going to be pretty busy minding other people's business, taking care of our own here at home, with massive unemployment, with people losing their homes, with people's retirement security in jeopardy. Look, we cannot be global cop. We have to look to where you can resolve things on a peaceful basis. We did not do that in Libya. We chose to accelerate a war, and now we've achieved a stalemate. And what I'm suggesting, after Congress has finally weighed in and demanded information from an administration that unfortunately ignored the Constitution and the statute with respect to the War Powers Act, let's move towards a peace agreement. Get the parties together. Look at what the African Union proposed. Let's ask for a ceasefire, a dialogue between the parties, and the blueprint for a democracy. It is possible. Otherwise, what are we looking at? Another client state here in Libya? Well, we spend hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars. We cannot do that. We cannot continue to promote war. Peace plan.
All right. Representative Dennis Kucinich, airing your thoughts will become official there on Capitol Hill tomorrow.